to Season 2 of Pasco Podcast, a series where we discuss leadership and public service. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the 550,000 plus residents of Pasco County, as represented by the Board of County Commissioners. It's through their trust and empowerment of our workforce and leadership team that we're able to bring you this podcast. We created this podcast to help public servants build leadership skills and leverage them for success by sharing the experiences of our peers.
Hi, I'm Dan Biles, and welcome to our 8th episode of Pasco Podcast. Joining us today from our Public Services branch is Support Services Director Paula Baracaldo and Community Services Director Brian Hoben. So welcome, and thanks for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you both here.
Oh, thank you very much for having us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, and this is kind of going to be our millennial take today, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Got to spice it up.
So, as Gen Xer, we'll try to ask you some reasonable questions.
Okay.
So as we get started, tell us kind of a little bit about yourself, but also then get into your leadership philosophy and then kind of how that developed over time.
So I guess I'll get started. So Paula Baracaldo, I have been with the county for a little over 9 years. Kind of grew up in local government and public service within the organization. My last position, actually, before I switched over to public services, was serving as chief of staff to our host, Mr. Biles here. But basically, I think the philosophy of leadership that I have really entails supporting your team. Never ask someone to do something that you yourself wouldn't do. Sometimes it's about rolling your sleeves and ensuring that people not only feel encouraged, but they're coached, that you're educating them, that you are helping them manage through tough and difficult situations, but you're also celebrating their successes. It's not really about you, it's about them, and just providing a level of genuine care for them as people, because of course, our lives continue outside of the confines of our buildings and our smartphones and the laptops, right? And so just kind of realizing that we need to provide some level of humanity to the jobs that we do in all the various disciplines. It's keenly important.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Yeah, Brian Hoben, Director of Community Services. I've been with Pasco County now for 5 years. I've had the unique experience of working with 3 different branches. I was hired on in internal services, did some work over here in emergency management, and I've spent the last 3.5 years with public services. And it's just been a phenomenal learning experience for myself. And that's really contributed to my leadership style. We talk a lot about servant leadership. I think that really embodies a lot of what Paula just talked about. But to me, servant leadership is not just leading, with your team and caring about your team, but it's caring about your team through action. It's caring about your team not just through the verbal cues and going through the motions and asking individuals, how are you today? But it's truly caring about how they are. It's showing them that you're there for them. You're there to learn with them. You're there to support their growth, and really just be, like Paula said, show that human side. Be there to support them, and again, just help with their continued growth.
Okay, well, thanks. So, as you started your career, as you were growing up, or when did you kind of realize that you kind of enjoyed leading others, or you wanted to be a leader, or you wanted to lead others?
So yeah, I'll start with that one. To me, it was actually a culmination of experiences. Number one, I had the unique opportunity around 25 to help coach high school basketball, actually at the high school that I graduated from. So coaching and shaping the lives of young men, that was kind of an eye-opening experience to have that kind of influence and to build that relationship where you can see the influence that you have on these young men going off to college to start their own world and start their own lives and impact the world. And then, you have your leadership experiences that you go through personally. I've learned a lot through the leaders that I've had, and I've been very fortunate to have one of 2 styles of leaders, and those were leaders that I've very much so looked up to and have learned a lot from because of their leadership style and because of the way they've taught me. And then I've had, conversely, leaders that I said, I will never lead like this. I really disagree with the philosophy. And again, I think that's a learning experience for myself. So, I've taken all of those experiences, and through my journey as a young leader, I've taken those lessons. And as you get to influence other individuals and see the outcome of that and see the impact, not only that you're making on the community, because that's what we're here for, but the impact that you're making on the lives that you work with, the people that are your team members, the people that are truly your friends, and the people that you care about, that to me has really shaped, not only the leadership experience, but it creates more drive to continue that leadership journey.
Right. And I love the example of a coach, because while there's a lot of aspects of coaching that parallel the aspects of leadership, right?
Absolutely.
The great coaches, care for their players so much they want to push them past what their players think they can do.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes that requires discipline. That requires some other things that to do that. So yeah, I love that connection there between the two. Paula?
So for me, it really has been about my life experience. I was originally born in Colombia, and so when I arrived to the U.S., I didn't really know the language very well, and so it kind of made me grow a little bit quicker, and it kind of forced me to become a little bit more resourceful and creative in trying to either learn processes or learn how certain things worked that maybe my parents weren't even aware of. And so an example of that was, when I was trying to look out for information for my brothers to go to college. That's not necessarily something that is easily accessible sometimes. And so if you are not aware of those networks, you kind of have to kind of take charge and start connecting those dots. And so that's very much also the way that I see myself within the organization. As a leader, you're always a facilitator, connecting those that have the information to those who do not, connecting those resources to the people that need them. And honestly, in terms of leadership, I always kind of see, leaders, those individuals that make those detrimental, life-changing, life-altering decisions. And so I can't say that I have a fully fledged, I have mastered the art of leadership yet, but I'm definitely on my way. And it is a tremendously humbling experience to work with so many talented individuals.
Right. Yeah. No, I love the example of how learning the language and how that has to help you, learn some of those connections.
Yeah, because it goes beyond just translating. It's interpreting things, right? And my brothers are probably going to be sorely disappointed that I spoke to their teachers, and I probably was harder on them than my mom probably would have been. But it was also coming from my own experience, not necessarily having that connection. And so I always try to encourage and grow and guide the teams that I work with so that they have all of those resources, because not having them can hinder your professional and personal growth.
Right. So in terms of leadership, who's kind of been the biggest influence on your style and how you lead? And Brian, you mentioned negative and positive influences. Both are very, important, right?
Absolutely. I really think, again, just kind of referring back to those experiences, I've had a unique opportunity to see both sides of the coin. There are some decisions that I make that I refer back to those negative experiences. And when I say, oh, yeah, I'm doing this completely opposite from the leader that I had that I feel was not a good leader, then I know I'm making the right decision. But in all honesty, I'm very lucky, and I think it'd be remiss without saying that I'm coming from a role where I was the program administrator for the public services branch for the past 2.5 years. So that gave me the opportunity to work with a phenomenal group of directors. All of them I greatly look up to. Those are all really good leaders. And then of course, in that role, in a way, I get to be the understudy to the assistant county administrator for public services, who again really embodies that servant leadership. And not just in a way where she talks about servant leadership or she drives that message to us, but she does that with action. She shows us that she cares. She's personally been there for all of us as leaders and supported us throughout our mission, whether that be creating a new program or working through the jobs and the people that we work with here at the county. But she also cares about us in our personal lives, which creates that bond and that connectivity between us, because we know that when our back's against the wall, she has our back, and that has just been so influential to see that kind of leadership, and then to take those lessons learned and to implement them on your own team and start to build those same relationships that you have with a leader above you, and then you can see that connectivity. That to me is an amazing part of the journey that I'm currently experiencing as a young director.
Right. Excellent.
So I'm going to be a little bit cheesy. I'm going to refer back to my family.
That's great.
My grandfather, definitely somebody that I very much looked up to. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was the type of person that he would always emphasize that you should do good no matter what, without expecting anything in return, because it wasn't about the outcome for you per se, but it was about ensuring that people were in the right place, had the right things, and if you could affect that positively in any way, shape, or form, then you were doing what you were supposed to. And so I kind of draw back on that, and likewise with what Brian mentioned, examples where people oftentimes don't empathize with their team or don't put themselves in their shoes, and so kind of keep that in mind as I'm going every day through the work that we do, right? I may not be necessarily the expert, but if there's any way, shape, or form that I can identify someone who maybe is really great at a particular task and having them grow those particular skill sets, then provide them with those opportunities, right? Provide that clear intent, but at the same time, provide them the flexibility to grow and not feel terrified if there is a mistake. And so that's very much akin back to how my grandfather raised me and the example that he provided for me.
Yeah, and it's not really cheesy at all. I think probably half of our guests have referenced a family member that they learned leadership from by watching and observing. And I go back to the greatest influence is my father and watching him and how he led over time. So no, I think it's a great example. And so you've both seen different parts of the county. You've worked in different parts of the county, administration, and then Brian in internal services, and of course here in emergency management. How does the leadership style differ based on kind of your customer interactions, right? Because you have different customers in internal services or administration. You have different customers than you do today. So how does that leadership style change as you go in different parts of or not change as you're in different parts of the organization?
So I think the leadership style really depends on the leader themselves because to your point, Dan, I think it can change and it cannot change. And it really does depend on your customer base. Right now working in public services, when we work and if you look at the public services branch holistically, it's a very unique branch. There are very specific lines of business, very niche, kind of departments, if you will. And I think that when we work now, we can see a direct connection with the community, whether it be through a program that we advent or a process that we put in place to help the customer directly. So you kind of see that almost immediately or very close to immediately. Whereas when you're working with internal services and your customer is really other team members within the county, you may not see that direct connection to the work that you have immediately, but you know that there's value in it. And I think that the leadership kind of embodies that. And either way, whether your direct customer is the citizen or whether it's other employees, I think that the leadership message that I've always received was the importance of what our job was and the support function that our job had. So I have to say that even though I've kind of seen three different branches of the county, I'm very pleased to say that for the most part it's been a very consistent leadership style, which really embodies the importance of serving our customer, no matter who that customer is.
Right. It goes back to the mission statement, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So,
yeah, I think very similarly, we manage the work that we do according to our customer, right? But I think that level of expectation and service to our community should remain the same, right? The same level of care for their problems, listening, even if it's a coworker, ensuring that you are actively serving them and not necessarily just taking in the information and kind of passing it off for something to get done without demonstrating that level of care. But absolutely, depending on where you are, obviously that's going to change. Like, for example, when I served as interim director at the building construction services department, that was a personal challenge for me, right? Because I did not have that technical expertise. But at the same time, whenever we were dealing with customers, the goal was to listen to that particular customer, understand what their needs were, and still provide that same level of service that I would have provided in administration, even more so because in terms of the customer that you're serving, right? Time is money, right? But always honor that respect, that experience, and ensure that people feel heard and that they feel understood. I think that's very important as a leader.
Right. Excellent. No, that's great. So as you've kind of looked back, any examples of leadership lessons learned, successes, challenges that you'd want to kind of share and talk about?
Absolutely.
It's like, oh boy.
That's why you're here today, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think recently at the team leaders meeting, we've kind of been talking about allowing team members almost a scary amount of trust and a scary amount of freedom. Allowing them the ability to go out there and potentially fail, and how frightening that is as a leader. And I think that, I've kind of experienced that throughout the pandemic with the advent of a lot of the programs that community services has put into place. And again, I think that I have specific teams. Senior services is such a phenomenal team. They put in practices to create a drive-through. That was an idea from one of our program coordinators, and that became a statewide best practice. So that just, again, that's allowing the team to come up with the ideas, allowing the team to be creative and innovative, and just supporting that function. And when you kind of take the reins off and just let them be free and let them, again, the individuals who are working on the front line, they know the business best. When you allow them to kind of have that freedom, and then of course back them up, support them, try to knock down as many walls as you possibly can for them to accomplish that goal. That to me is where you start to see the success stories, because that makes a positive impact in our community to the citizens, which then in turn, shows the employees, hey, my ideas and our solutions, that created a positive impact. So it's a twofold win, because you win with the community, but you also win with your team.
Right.
So that's, some of the success that I've experienced more recently.
Right. Okay.
So last year when the pandemic started, we immediately had to run in and start kind of figuring out how to change our operations and put them in a more digital format, right? And so part of that in administration was kind of switching the way that we hosted our board of county commissioners meetings, right? One of the realizations that you always know it takes a village to get the work done ultimately. But I think one of the realizations that I had was the humility that it takes or that you earn as you work through a process that might seem, sort of like switch on, switch off, right? Let's turn operations into a digital format. It takes a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise and collaboration and patience and understanding to make sure that everybody has what they need in order to get to that outcome and be successful. That's probably one of the proudest things that we've probably done in that office. One of the things that I think back on is, there were times when team members in the office were concerned because, there are things that were happening in their personal lives that were creating pressure on their performance at work. And so how to figure out and go back and help them navigate through that process so that they could still be their very best self, not just at home, but also at work. And granted, it wasn't perfect, but it absolutely meant to them that we cared and that we were providing that level of flexibility and trust that was so needed and necessary. One of the things that I kind of go back to is this acronym. I've gone fully native with GovSpeak, ROLL, right? So read everything that you can to educate yourself, to digest information, and be well aware of what you're doing. Observe good behavior. Observe those examples of leadership that maybe fall short of where we need to be. Learn from both of those specific traits, right? Go back to what you've learned, not just in theory, but in practice, and then emulate those examples so that you can make sure that every chance that you keep moving forward in an organization, whether it be Pasco County or in private sector, whichever it is, you are supporting your team with the very best of what your philosophy or your leadership style is.
Right. Yeah. And even, the example you used of trying to go from the in-person board meetings where we had one feed that went out on, Pasco TV to hybrid virtual, everybody's there virtually. And then now we were able to, through, the help of some people in this room that are helping us today, stream not just on Pasco TV, but on YouTube now and Facebook and all the different things using the same feeds. And now you're working back in, to in-person, but now citizens and the public have more opportunity now to comment on a board meeting, more opportunity to watch than they did, 14 months ago, right? Yeah. If they wanted to comment 14 months ago, they had to walk into the board meeting and make a public comment in person at either 10 or 1:30. And now, you can WebEx in or virtual in, you can send an email in or show up at the kiosk.
Right.
And so a lot of different things happen. They actually provide a better service today than we provided 18 months ago.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and that all had that touched people throughout the organization had a hand in that.
Absolutely.
Right? So, no, I love that great example. And you saw real time the impact we were having on the community, right? Going from we had to close our senior centers.
Yep.
Well, let's figure out another way to serve them. Well, what about drive-through?
Yep.
Boom, there you go. Now we're serving them, and even our meetings got recognized by a regional.
Yeah, absolutely. We're recognized statewide for that, and also Todd Kersey, who was so instrumental in that process. He was our Employee of the Year, right? Well deserved in changing the dynamic, overcoming adversity, and then setting an example for others to emulate, right?
Right, and that get back to we got to change our meetings. Okay, go.
Right.
And then, okay, tell me what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what we did. Right. So, no, a great example. I remember seeing some of the first drive-ups and how that worked. And,
And you think about it, it's when you take a step back, you don't think like, oh my God, that's such a simple solution. But it really takes those team members to step back and say, how can we run the same process that we've been running for so long in a different way? It was actually Carolyn Johnson who came up with the idea, and she said, hey, this pandemic has caused everything to shut down, but drive-throughs are still open. Why can't we create a drive-through? And it's just that it takes that one idea, that one fire of that, the brain to just kind of recognize, oh my God, other people are doing this. We could do it too. We can implement it. And that's where the idea just starts to snowball and takes hold.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think any of us would like to relive the pandemic. So I think coming out, we've learned so much about our team, but about different ways we can run our organization that are even more efficient and more effective. And that's the key thing, right? More effective than we were running them 18 months ago.
Right.
Right. So I don't think anybody wants to relive last March and April.
No.
But there are a lot, I think, great things we learned through that.
Absolutely.
So as you continue to build in your career and your leadership skills, what are some tools and things you use to help develop your leadership skills and styles?
I think there's an array of tools in the toolbox. We have that list of leadership books. I think that constantly reading, constantly pushing yourself to be open-minded. Learn about other sectors, learn about other businesses, even other local county governments. How are they doing the same things that we're doing? I think that's always helpful. It's great to be surrounded by phenomenal leaders. That's always helpful because we have the ability to bounce ideas and problems off of each other. And 9 out of 10 times, those problems have been experienced by someone else in the organization. Right. So having the ability to network through the organization and talk through those things with programs like the LDP and other programs that have brought leaders together to be able to have those conversations is a great tool. And of course, pushing yourself to get educated through the conferences, training, and putting yourself out there, doing things that will allow us to open our mind and look at different perspectives and make sure that we can be open-minded and learn about how others handle certain problems. I think that continues that lifelong learning process for all of us to continue our leadership growth. Coupled with the fact that, we're working with human beings every day. Every day is a new learning experience, in some kind of microcosm. So I think that, just going to work every day and dealing with the problems that come up that, are maybe few and far between, but the new problems and problems that we haven't faced, before, and working through those problems with your team, working through those problems, as a leader and with the individuals that are frontline employees, that just creates another tool in that toolbox as a leader. Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think I always seek out experience, right? I very much take advantage of our professional association, the Florida City County Managers Association, the International City County Managers Association, leaders within the organization who may have gone through similar experiences. I think what happens sometimes as you grow into a leadership position, you tend to romanticize the idea of leadership, right? And you see these amazing rock stars, right, that are just doing amazing work day by day. And you sometimes don't stop to think that, they've been through very difficult and challenging situations. And so I always go back and rely on that level of expertise and advice. all the while, of course, through the educational opportunities that we have been offered in the organization, and through opportunities that you may have to seek out outside of the organization as well. You kind of come to your own answer if you're trying to seek out a problem. I always recommend people to seek out a coach and seek out a mentor. They're not the same, but they're tremendously helpful in your ability to be successful. And when people in higher positions or that have long-term experience in a particular discipline know that you care enough to reach out to them for advice, they are more than willing to share that. And so I think that's probably one of the most valuable tools that not only enables us to gain that experience and kind of share of that information, but also build on that succession in the organization, right? Because I think probably that's how I ended up in public services, right? So very, very grateful for that.
And so, you're part of what I'll call the new cadre of leadership in Pasco County, right? The next generation, if you will. How do you identify and raise and build leaders inside your teams?
Yeah, that was a shout out to millennials. I like that, Dan. I want to make sure that's on the record real quick.
Yes.
So.
The world keeps turning one day at a time.
That's a great question. I think that, again, working through, the issues and the problems that come up daily is a big part of that. But also, referencing what we previously talked about, allowing them the freedom to make those decisions. I think that, to Paula's point, a good part of where we are in our journey is because we've gone through some failure, and we're going to continue to go through, failure and learn and grow. And embodying that and allowing other people to go through that and having those same learning experiences, as opposed to being like, hey, I really think you should do it this way, because, this isn't going to work out. Allow individuals to make those decisions. Allow them to be a part of the solution. That is a great way in identifying who are the individuals on your team that want to step up, who want to come up with solutions, as opposed to maybe the ones who just say, hey, I have a problem, I need you to fix it. I have another problem, I need you to fix it. So you can kind of already start to identify the ones who not only are passionate about what they do, but the ones who really realize the freedom that they have to make those decisions and appreciate that. And then they start to run with it. And those are the ones, to me, that really stand out as, again, next level leadership.
Right. All right. That's great.
So I think in every opportunity that I've had to either grow someone, coach someone, or even hire someone, always look for that skill set, for that spark, for that desire and passion to serve. I think you can teach those skills, right? But if that individual is not convinced 100% that this is what they want to do, they might not be in the right seat, or for that matter, even in the right bus, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you have to support people through those dynamics, right? But I think allowing them the opportunity to have that open conversation with you on what those challenges are. And if you don't know the answer, right, be honest with them and at least connect them to someone who may know the answer and can help them continue to grow, or identify those sources of knowledge, or give them the opportunity to participate in a project or in another way where they can grow those skills that they already have in their toolbox, but don't necessarily get to utilize within their job, right? I mean, we get hired and there's a very specific job description, but that doesn't mean that we are, again, tied to that box, right? There's a tremendous array of skills that we can take advantage of, and that may eventually lead someone to grow into a different role within the organization. Right. So I think always kind of acknowledging that, maybe when you're hiring someone, they may be in the organization or in your team within a year or two. If they're there longer, fantastic. But always keep in mind that there's always that potential for professional growth, and you need to support that. So, just identifying those skills, it's very important.
Excellent. No, that's great. And I just, some of the threads that have gone through the entire conversation are things like, service, caring for your people, the whole person, right? Not just the 40 hours a week person. Those are some of the same threads I heard from, the boomers I've had in here, right? In the Gen Xers, it's leadership is good leadership is consistent across the generations, right? Yeah. I don't think there's a difference. We come from it with different experiences and,
right.
From because of our generational differences.
Yeah.
But in general, good leadership is consistent across generations. Right. So as you've grown in the organization, so it's a little off-script question, but as you've grown in the organization, and obviously the organization is led by those that are older, another generation, how have you seen the organization change with the dynamic that the younger generation brings to the organization? Part of my goal is I want to make sure I have enough different voices in the room that somebody is there that can spot the blind spot, right? And that includes generational blind spots. But how do you see the organization changing because millennials aren't in school anymore. I mean, in fact, the next generation is starting to graduate from college. Yeah. So you're actually no longer the entry-level employees anymore. How do you see the county leadership changing or that whole dynamic changing from your perspective?
I think it's very adaptive. I know we talked about the pandemic a little bit and how, we had a lot of brainstorming sessions on, how do we do this overnight? How do we become an organization that comes into work and now is, supporting a work from home organization or making the changes like you mentioned to the board meeting. And I think, a part of that open-mindedness and part of the cultural shift that the organization has gone through in the past, 3.5 years really supports, the ability for everyone to come to the table, no matter the generation, and bring ideas. And I think that's clearly seen throughout the organization. I love working in the same branch as Paula. We were on a WebEx the other day, and we were doing some strategic planning stuff, and someone went to share their screen, and everyone was squinting at the screen because it was really tiny. And Paul was like, hey, right on the left side of the screen, there's a little plus arrow. It'll zoom it in. And everyone's like, oh, my God. And I'm like, oh, thank God. I was squinting, too. I didn't know, So she's our resident,
tech support.
Super millennial. Yeah, she's teaching me stuff all the time. So, but it's awesome to experience that and to see that, regardless of the generation, some people are just more technologically savvy. Some people have, it's the mixture of how we've grown up, what our experiences were, what have shaped us as leaders. But I think now that with the cultural shift, we all have that ability to just be open-minded and share those ideas and listen a little bit more than I think maybe we have in the past. I think that that's a big part of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, can I say #work from home?
Right.
Right. I think, just changing the dynamic that, just because we've been doing things a certain way, it holds true forever, right? And that's not always the case. Likewise, there are good ideas and good, practices and norms that have lived through the ages, right? And will continue to carry forward, the sense of decorum during a board meeting, right? Taking into consideration somebody's advice who has been doing a specific job for quite some time, right? But at the same time, being open and flexible in that if you are giving your team guidance, if you are kind of providing that scope of where the outcome should be, enabling that bandwidth so people can adapt, so they can grow, and they're not afraid of making changes or suggestions. I think that's one of the biggest changes that we've seen culturally in the organization. Although we still have lots of work to do, but it's just making people feel safe to be open and responsive, to ensure that no idea is going to be dismissed, and also not assuming that because you are a leader in a leadership position, you know everything, right? I think just getting comfortable with the idea of that humility that comes within those roles. Yes, we may not know everything, but we can absolutely help you with PDFs if you need help, FYI. But at the same time, those newer generations that are coming through, mentoring them, coaching them, and serving as a sounding board for them so that they can do even better than what we've been able to achieve. I think that's the goal, that if you are coaching, educating, mentoring, growing your teams, if you're doing those things right, they will pay it forward. And that's what this is all about, paying it forward so the next generation can do an even better job.
Right. Yeah. We opened up, our team leaders meeting to LDP. The people in the LDP, we've had them come to, the executive meetings and team meetings, really just so they can see the debate and discussion and honestly to participate in it because they bring something to the table. I remember when we first hired, you into the chief of staff role. And I said, no, she's going to come into this assistant county administrator meetings because I need somebody in there that thinks and sees the problems from a different angle, right? You can't have too many different angles looking at something, right? So.
Which, by the way, also adds to the, sometimes it's terrifying to be in a room and you're not,
smartest person in the room.
Either not just the smartest person in the room, but also like the youngest person in the room. And you're like, oh man, is this going to sound crazy? But, I kind of act on the side of, I'll say it. I'll be the biggest defender of the underdog and just kind of try to put things out there that maybe are not being discussed. And I think Brian acts the same way. It's those things that, we're seeing at our level and there's value to that.
Yeah. And you've been at those meetings, from time to time and see how the discussion happens. And
absolutely.
The other biggest thing about that whole position was I needed somebody that thinks differently sitting next to me to tell me when I was going down the wrong path.
Right.
Right. Because you just get fixated and you need somebody there. I call it the position that tells Emperor you have no clothes. Right. That's what we need in those. So great. Hey, I really appreciate y'all both being here today. Now we go to the lightning round.
Oh, dear.
These are the questions.
Here we go.
Although I will say these questions were developed and found by Paula. So she has seen them. All right. So I'm going to start with the normal one.
Okay.
The one. And I'm sure I know the answer, but I'm going to say The Office or Parks and Rec?
Ooh. I'm going to go The Office. That's close, but I'm going to go The Office. The Office just edges it out. I love that. Love that sense of humor.
I'm going to go with Parks and Rec. April Ludgate, and she's just so much fun to watch. I love that, and of course, there's so much that it's so relatable to the work that we do. It's kind of terrifying.
I kind of feel like I need to apologize to Keith Wiley because when he sees this, he's gonna be like, "Man, really?"
It's okay.
Hey, Keith.
Sorry, Keith.
So, texting or talking?
Texting.
Oh, I'm talking. I get a text and like if I can't reply in like 2 sentences, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling. And I know that drives some of my my other counterparts insane. But yeah, I guess
you're an older millennial.
Yeah, I am an older millennial.
millennial.
Oh man, crazy.
You're in that gray area?
I am. I'm real.
Welcome to the club of the kids that didn't grow up with a remote. So what's your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Christmas. Sure. It's about family, right?
Yeah, family.
Yeah, those are both family holidays.
And food. I mean,
and food.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Let's be real.
Right.
Very true.
Right. So what's next on your travel list? The place you want to go travel? Well, we can travel. It's just a little different than it used to be.
So are you asking a place I haven't been before? Or just
let's go a place you haven't been before.
Ooh, so actually my brother is stationed in the military. He's being restationed to Hawaii in the next month.
Okay.
And I have never been further west than St. Louis. So Hawaii, yeah, I know.
You haven't been across the Mississippi?
Nope. No. So, so a trip out. I'll stop in California on the way and then hit Hawaii. So that's
nice.
Next on the list. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my boyfriend got me into watching this show Vikings, and then I started reading the history of Vikings, and now we want to go to Sweden and Norway to learn more.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm not going to ask about the Spanish word.
Come on.
We can see if Brian knows a word in Spanish.
He probably does.
Let's try this. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try it.
Say a word in Spanish.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien.
Yeah.
¿Dónde está el baño?
Cerveza.
Oh, yeah. Cerveza, chapito.
Excelente.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Thanks for being here today. Y'all were great. These are always a lot of fun. Get to know a little bit more about each, even though we sat kind of next to each other for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I miss maybe almost 3 years. It's been great both to have Paula here today and Brian as well. I really appreciate the work you do. Not only here in the discussion today, but the work you actually do in public services and the impact y'all have on the community, and looking forward to great things for y'all. Not just now, but as in the future, as those of us that are currently in leadership move on, and y'all become some of the future leaders of the county. Really looking forward to that. So great to have you here today, and special thanks to our media relations team who made all this possible, including the hybrid virtual meetings that we talked about earlier. I'm Dan Biles. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Pasco Podcast. And until the next one, we will see you around. Thanks.
For more information on Pasco County government, please visit mypasco.net and check us out on Facebook and Twitter.